Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about some copper companies that are of interest. Bear in mind most of these are like high risk or are not producing. To bear that in mind, let's go right into it. Why on earth would we care about copper? It's in a structural deficit. It's each year they're using more and more copper due to lack of investments. It's going to have a problem with deficits. And this is from a video from Future Minerals, by the way, where Robert Friedland, they showed a slide where according to Microsoft's most recent data center in Chicago, apparently they used 2.1 million kilos of copper. They used about 10,000 kilos of antimony. They used about 6,400 kilos of silver, which is like 6.4 tons of silver. They used 2.2 tons of gold. And apparently they used almost 1 ton of rare earth. A little bit over 1 ton of rare earths. Or 1.6 tons of rare earth. Why on earth would copper be of interest? The fact that it is needed in wiring and electrical work, plumbing, machinery, sculpturing, it's used in jewelry, it's used in tools and musical instruments, it's used in alloys, a lot of tools. It's used in a lot of things, at least according to evboosters.com. Apparently, in 2015, about each EV required 100 kilos of copper, and by 2030, apparently that would fall to 62 kilos of copper. But obviously, with the increasing use of EVs, and they still use more copper than normal cars, data centers, let's forget about EVs for a moment. This is according to carboncredits.com. Apparently, copper supply gap would reach 6 million tons by 2035 if demand keeps rising at the current pace. Not faster, but just at this pace. Apparently data centers would need 4.3 million tons of copper, apparently. And according to BNEF, they suspect that copper demand could almost double by 2035. There's a lot of bullish signals for copper. And apparently, according to BHP, copper could rise by 72% by 2050. So obviously there's like a mixture of opinions, but the overall point is that copper is in dire need, and the fact that they have not invested sufficient to keep production up, and the fact that demand is growing, companies in copper space could really benefit in the future. So let's go over to the companies that I currently like. Bear in mind, none of this is financial advice. I just like these companies. But we are first going to talk about Viscaria. It's not called Viscaria Copper, by the way, but it's a copper company. This is in Sweden and is measured and indicated. They have about 1.3 billion pounds of copper. I even wrote some notes. And the fact that they would apparently be producing in 2027, apparently at the end of 2027. It has hydropower. It has all permits, or most. They have a processing plant, they have a water treatment, they have rail yards, which apparently is electric because obviously Sweden, you know, and it has power, which is hydroelectric, and is one of the largest projects of copper in the EU, and it has gotten some funding. And apparently Swedbank, is one of the largest pension funds in Sweden, is invested in this company, which is one of the larger shareholders of the company. One of the largest unions for white collars is invested in the company. Another Swedish pension fund called Scania is also part of it, and one of the oldest and most reputable banks in Sweden, called Handelsbanken, is also invested in the company. Like, institutional people in Sweden are invested in this company. And by the way, that with 1.3 billion pounds of copper, it's just in measured and indicated, and they are perhaps projecting to get more. And apparently the main area of Viscaria accounts for just 2% of the total permitted area they can have exploration. Better than mine. And apparently I think one of the largest rare earth deposits in Europe is was discovered close by to this company. Apparently it's not part of this company, but it was discovered close proximity to the company, somewhat close proximity. And apparently I think they have a combined copper resource at the current moment of 2.1 billion pounds. That's inferred and measured and indicated. They would apparently have a 16-year mine life. It was 0.9% grade copper, and this place would have some infrastructure apparently because it used to be mined in the 70s and 80s, but it still has a lot of ore. Interesting. Obviously it was very cheap in December. I was only paying attention to lithium, rare earths, gold and silver in December, so I wasn't paying attention to copper, which is a bummer. But this company seems very interesting. This and Foran Mining, which is now or very close to producing, which is in Canada, by the way. But this company seems also very interesting, the fact that it has infrastructure and so forth. And the next one on the list is Highland Copper. This company has a fully diluted 781 million shares outstanding. One of the main shareholders is Orion Mining Finance, Greenstone Resources, Osisko Gold Royalties, and the management has about 1%, and high net worth individuals and retail owns 33%. Very nice number. They just, apparently, according to the press release of 13th of January, they liquidated the remaining 34% of the White Pine North project, which was a major copper deposit, but obviously they still have another copper deposit. This is from like 2023 feasibility study where their project Copperwood, this is in Michigan by the way, in the United States, they have apparently 820 million pounds of copper in proven and probable reserves and about 3.2 million ounces of silver. In copper resource, they seem to have in mineral resource in inferred, they have 1.9 billion pounds of copper. So it's very interesting. The fact that this company is fully permitted on private land, the fact that they would have some infrastructure in the Michigan it's like in the upper area of Michigan, and they have received a $50 million grant from the state to fund the infrastructure, and the fact that the company has basically all the permits, and they do have, apparently, at $5 copper per pound, they would have an average annual operation cash flow of $210 million and a 33% IRR. And bear in mind, we are closer now to $6 per pound. And the fact that they also have project funding from the US EXEM Bank, apparently up to $250 million debt financing for the copper project. And they have apparently support from Jack Bergman, which is a Republican in Michigan, a Democrat called Slothkin, very nice name, probably very productive. And apparently they have a potential construction decision by the later half of 2026. So this company could start producing in like 2028, 2030 in America. Proved to be very interesting. But obviously there are other American copper companies such as Arizona Sonora Copper. But it's Northwest Copper. This company has an all-season forest road access, rail by Mackenzie and Fort St. James apparently. And apparently it's royalty free and 100% owned. And the fact that this company would apparently in 2026 update their PEA. And the fact that according to obviously their old document apparently, they had in copper in measured and indicated about 850 million pounds. This is measured and indicated. In gold, they had in measured and indicated 1.3 million ounces gold at 1.6 grams per ton and about like 5 million ounces of silver. That's just in measured and indicated. They would obviously have some in inferred as well. Where with copper, they would have 260 million copper pounds in inferred and apparently 250,000 ounces gold in inferred and 4 million ounces of silver in inferred. And the fact that obviously they're making a new PEA because apparently the IRR was too low, too high payback time, even though back then when they made a PEA they were using $1,600 per ounce of gold and $21 per ounce of silver and $3.5 per pound of copper. So they are apparently updating that PEA in 2026 to improve the margins and or like improve the. So in 2026 they are drilling 8,000 meters to enhance the information on this resource, and that seems to be basically what they're going to be doing. So by 2027 apparently they will have updated the mineral resource to advance a PFS study. So this is obviously a couple of years from production, bear that in mind. This is not like the Swedish company we were just talking about, which is that would apparently be producing in 2 years or like less than 2 years, in like 1 year and like 11 months, which is basically 2 years. But Northwest Copper seems very interesting. It's a very long way from production, but you know, maybe with the right incentives things could go faster.